most things.
Oh, no.
I think he was kidding, but you never know with those British people.
Yeah, you never know with Nigel.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Hurdy Gurdy Cafe, an hour of interviews, music, and camaraderie. I'm Ryan, and I'll be your host along this crazy adventure through the land of the wheel fiddle. So strap in, and let's see what's cranking in the Hurdy Gurdy community today.
So welcome back everyone to the Hurdy Gurdy Cafe podcast. We've got another special guest today. His name is Francesco, and he's with the band Trigo, Migo. Welcome, Francesco.
Hello.
Yes, great to have you. And as always, we have Sergio Gonzalez with us. Welcome, Sergio.
Hello.
Yeah, great to see you. So before we get into our discussion with Francesco, we're going to start listening to a track from his band Trigo Migo. And the name of this track again is Le Viellieux. Is that how you pronounce that?
Viellieux.
Okay, close enough.
So your French is improving, right?
My French is improving. I started watching some Netflix shows with French language and English subtitles, so hopefully I'll get it eventually. But anyway, let's have a listen.
Le pan de vielle qui me fait gagner mon peine. À toi vielle fidèle, je ne connais pas la peine. Je fais danser la jeunesse pour la fête du amour. Et puis la nuit, la tristesse, elle joue en désert nouveau. Je parcours la campagne, ma vielle sur les dents. Ma tendre compagne ne prend jamais de repos. Quand une affaire se présente, de suite pour faire danser. Ma vielle si contente, vite se met à glisser. On en t'entendre, vielle aux accords joyeux, fille à l'âme tendre. Et dans le cœur amoureux, et partout dans le village, tu apportes la gaieté. On se plaît à rendre hommage à tes charmes enchantés. Et puis la nuit, la tristesse, un jour un désert nouveau.
right, so welcome back. That was a track from Francesco's band Trigo Migo. And Francesco, can you tell us a little bit about that track?
Yeah, well, this is a melody I've found on old books from France mainly. With this band, what we do as a dancing project, as a music project, is to take back some music from old recordings or from old writings, and we take them back. We rearrange them in order to be playable as a dance. So this is a melody that talks about a Hurdy Gurdy player that used to go and travel within villages to play and make some happy time for all the people here in food life in that way.
Excellent. And your band, it's a trio, right? It's you on Hurdy Gurdy. There's an accordion player and a singer. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And how did you all get together? How did you start playing?
Well, the group existed before I joined it. So the other two members were the founder of the group. And at the beginning, the group was about 5 people altogether, and it started on 2002. It's some time ago, and I joined them in 2009. And then we still play for quite some time as a quintet, and then 2 of the members needed to go elsewhere because they had too many projects, and so we decided to keep the band, but to shrink it to a trio, and now how it's that then developed within the last 7-8 years.
Well, you make more money when there's only 3 of you, right?
Of course, that's a big point for bands. Always do duos and trios, no more than 3.
Yeah. And Sergio, you're the one that introduced me to Francesco's music. So I'm curious, how do you two know each other?
I know Francesco because for me, he's one of the experts regarding the baroque epoca and the Gurdies of the 17th and 18th century. I really like talking with Francesco about old instruments, and for me it's always a pleasure to listen to him talking about this. So fantastic.
And so I'm guessing he has quite a collection from what I can see.
We can see something. Can you guess, Ryan?
No, I have no idea. I can't see it. What's back there, Francesco?
Well, back there, I think I have some of the oldest ones. Those are all playable actually, and it's baroque instruments. So the 2 there are from Viellieux.
Ooh.
It's this one, the lute bag. It's from 1754. And the guitar-shaped one is 1745. But the funny thing about this one is actually that in that era, since there were a huge demand, a really huge asking for Hurdy Gurdies, luthiers were used to take all their instruments that weren't à la mode at that period, so they weren't really used, like guitars and turbos and lute, and transform them into Hurdy Gurdy. And this is the case of that one. So this one, the guitar shape, it was an actual guitar, a Boboam, so a very well-known and one of the finest builder of 17th century.
Okay.
So it's about 1650, 1660.
Wow, man.
Almost 1 century after, like the Hurdy Gurdy Stradivari build from that Hurdy Gurdy.
Wow. It's interesting, for people to know where we are. Beethoven was born in 1770. You know what I mean? So
even Mozart was born in 1757.
Wow. For me, it's
both are older than Mozart. Yeah.
And you play those. Those are playable, right?
Yeah, of course. I play them every day, actually.
Huh.
It's
How cool
awesome.
is this? How cool is this? And who did restore that one, the bottom one? I'm very curious. Did you do it yourself, or did you take it to someone, to
Both
Boudet?
of that have been restored by a French builder, one that made 12th century history of Hurdy Gurdy building. That is Jean-Claude Boudet.
Ah, Boudet, yes.
I guess many people still know him. He's still alive and he's still building and restoring. It's almost 82 now.
Ooh.
Wow.
And I think an interesting thing about Boudet, correct me if I'm wrong, but does he own the Pajot old factory, right? In what is it, in Gensat?
Yes, exactly. Yes, I don't remember which year particularly, but I think it was in the 90s. He bought the name, so the brand.
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So the brand Pajot Jeune, and it took the last house, the last atelier from Pajot Jeune. Pajot Jeune was the last of the dynasty of the Pajot.
Okay, we will talk about the Pajot later, but now let's focus on Louvet. Let's focus on the Louvet is 17th century, right?
It's 18th century.
1700s, 18th century. And what can you tell us about the Gurdies of that era?
Well, if you look back at all the old Gurdies we have and that have been built, I've tried several from many different builders, from some different centuries. I have to say, from my personal experience, the instruments from 18th century are the best built and the best sounding. And also, really, the building quality was at its highest levels. And they were, you can also say they were quite lucky. Because at the end of 17th century, there has been a very short ice age. It's not as we imagine, like everything ice, but temperatures for like it was between I don't remember, it's like 30-50 years dropped down quite.
Okay.
So wood could grow in a more straight way. So all the veins are more tight and more precise, and that makes a huge difference for the sound.
Mm-hmm.
Because the quality of the wood really matters in how an instrument will sound, and that's why all the instruments, not only Hurdy Gurdies, but everybody knows about like Stradivari, Guarnieri del Gesù, so all those really high quality violins, and they were lucky as well as the Hurdy Gurdy builders, because for all the builders there at that time, wood was so high quality that all the instruments were really high quality sounding also.
So you're saying because of a mini ice age that happened around the 1700s, the trees grew straighter, and therefore the wood was better, and then therefore there were better sounding and better quality instruments. Yeah.
Yes, but of course it's not only that. Yeah, it's half is that, and the other half is the high quality of building.
Mm.
Well, for violins, it's the path is different, of course. But for Hurdy Gurdies, it really makes a difference to have like proper trained builders with top materials, with high quality in everything. They were building and increasing the characteristic and the sound of the instrument. If now we see as a standard a guitar-shaped Hurdy Gurdy and a lute-shaped Hurdy Gurdy, it's because those luthiers in the 18th century, they settled it. So they were the first ones to try this shape and to announce this shape.
It's fantastic.
So everything afterwards comes out of the work of those builders of 18th century. Actually, also the number of keys, the number of strings, all the GC, the CG setting actually is the baroque setting. That came through for the century to come.
Actually, so it is also in that period where when capos were invented, right?
Yes, exactly. It was actually, yeah. Well, they invented so many things actually that we don't think about it. It seems like, well, yeah, we have done a lot of improvements, but many of them, well, not all of them, of course, but many of them were already there in the 18th century. So they
How crazy is that, eh?
a lot. Like the capos was invented by Viellieux in the 18th century, of course, and it was used only for the trumpet. So they didn't place any on drones or
okay.
on the trumpet, because like this kind of repertoire was played mainly on two tonalities, so C and G. So the whole tuning of the instrument was to be able to play either in C major or minor, or G major or minor. And when you need to play in G, you cannot have a C drone below it. So you needed either a G or a D.
Or in D.
That's why you have the D capo.
How cool is that?
Yeah. So are all the tracks from that Tobie Miller, those Tobie Miller recordings you sent, or are those all in G and C?
Yeah, actually, yes.
Okay.
If you look at the score, all of them are G major or minor, C major or minor. And that's it. And you can go through all the repertoire that's been written down for Hurdy Gurdy, and it's actually all in those tonalities. And there are quite some repertoire. It's like almost like 1,000 sonatas. So,
wow, 1,000 sonatas! It's a lot. And who are the big composers, the big Hurdy Gurdy composers of that period, like Baton or?
Yeah, so some of the main are Baton was well known, of course. I think the two main, the two most known also can be Chedevy, Nicolas Chedevy, actually. Even though it was more of a musette player than a Hurdy Gurdy player, but he also played the Hurdy Gurdy. And he was a builder as well. He was building and developing the musette. The musette du cours was a particular kind of bagpipe used for baroque music. And another important name for the Hurdy Gurdy, especially because what he wrote was quite interesting, is Dupuy. Dupuy wrote some of the finest pages for Hurdy Gurdy.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's, a lot of his music it's really interesting, and it's really lovely and very hard to play as well.
So when you were talking about the quality of the build with these 18th century Hurdy Gurdies, so are you saying that before that time and after that time the build quality tended to be a little less like a good?
Yeah, well, you can say that, especially for what came before. That's before 18th century. So before aristocracy, French aristocracy, was interested into the Hurdy Gurdy. The instrument was mainly played by folk people. So it was used. We have a lot of drawing paintings from beggars, blind beggars. All those kind of
don't lose that train of thought. I want you to keep going with what you're going to talk about. But my question that just came up, which I've seen asked many times, is these days when we think about Hurdy Gurdies and the cost of Hurdy Gurdies, I always think to myself, how on earth were these ever folk instruments or beggar instruments, if you want to call it that? Because how did they afford those things? Were they just homemade and not quite as sophisticated? Is that the main difference?
Well, most of them, I think they were made not by luthiers, but like artisans. Maybe some of them could be like handmade by somebody who wanted them to play it. I've never heard like a 17th instrument being played so far, and there's not too many actually also. The oldest, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 16th century. The oldest ones we have still remain, and of course they are like in museums and not in playable condition. The sad thing about Hurdy Gurdy is that most of them are kept in museum or private collections, but with private collector that don't even know how to turn the crank. So almost all of those ancient and beautiful instruments are kept away from being heard. It's not easy to hear them play. So actually, like for me to hear a lute playing, I had to buy one.
Right. And when you bought it, and you bought one and then you had it restored, is that correct?
Right, exactly.
So when you first got it, I mean, what kind of shape are they in before they are restored? I mean, are there cracks in them? Are they what kind of shape are these instruments in before they're restored?
I know it really depends from the specific instrument. The specific history of the instrument.
Yeah. Whether someone's wife got mad at him and destroyed it.
Ryan, no. Don't talk about that. Smashing lubettes, no, please.
I have a cute story about some old instruments destroyed. I will tell you later.
Okay.
Remind me. Sometimes if you're lucky enough, the instrument is almost in perfect condition. It's really rare, but sometimes it can happen that the instrument didn't went into several restoring process, or like it lost almost all of its parts. But many times those instruments went through different restorations. What you can see, it's also like poorly restorations. Like sometimes they nail part in it with actual nails or screw. I've seen things screw in old instruments. Things repaired with metal parts.
Wow.
I've seen all sorts of stuff done on poor old instruments. So it's very difficult to find an instrument that it's almost to what it was at the origin, and with no cracks and all the reeds still intact. It's very hard. Like I was very lucky with this one. Yes. It was almost all there, or almost everything original. So the keyboard has been changed. So the keys has been changed. Not all of them, but the first row, like more than a half of the first row has been changed. But everything else on top, it's still original. And actually, it still had some of the original tangents.
Really?
Yes.
Come on.
It's
so nice.
Funny to see the 18th century tangents, and then you compare them to the 19th century tangents, and it's a whole different word actually.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, because in order to have a very precise sound, a wooden tangent needs to be quite sharp and quite small. And that's what you see on a 18th century instrument. If then you shift to a 19th century instrument, what you see, it's a very fat piece of wood, quite square, not even rounded at the edge. And that's Pajot quality. That's Pajot quality.
Okay.
Wow.
I've heard many good Pajot playing. But I do have one myself, but I had to do some work to refine some parts of it because we weren't really well refined actually. So it's quite funny to compare those instruments within different centuries.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, because the more you talk, the more questions I keep typing out here. But before we move on, why don't we take a moment to listen to one of the other tracks that you had wanted to feature during today's podcast? Sound good?
Yes.
let's listen to, and you can correct me again on my pronunciation. This is the Germán Díaz, La Topolina Amaranto. Is that correct?
Yes.
Good.
Okay. And let's have a listen and we can talk about it when we get back. Sound good? All right.
Yes.
Here we go. Okay. And welcome back again to the second season, episode 3 of the Hurdy Gurdy Cafe podcast. We're here with Francesco and Sergio, and we just got done listening to a track by Germán Díaz. What could you tell us about that track, Francesco?
So this is a track. It's a track I really like. It's actually coming from an Italian musician called Paolo Conte. One of the greatest jazz player here from Italy, and I really love the version from Germán. It's I used to listen to it quite often, the Germán version, because it's so cool actually.
Yeah, and how it starts out with the I'm assuming that's some kind of like music box that reads paper or some sort. Is that actually what's going on there, or is that some kind of audio intricacy?
Yeah, well, Germán has these amazing projects, those crazy ideas, where he plays together all those different, what's called like continuously sounding different instruments, like those orgue de barbarie, for example. So those like this kind of music box with this paper.
Mm-hmm.
Also need that it goes into the little machine and produce music, or those little carry-on he has prepared and settled to do the same thing. Or this crazy thing that I really love are those LP with the cardiac rhythm.
Oh yes,
yes,
it's so good.
It's amazing, and they compose special music on top of those heart beatings. heart beatings with problems, actually.
Yes,
So
exactly.
each one of those things has a cardiac problem, and they wrote, Herman and other musicians, they wrote on top of those specific music, and it's mind-blowing, really.
Well, if you can remember to send me a link to some of that, I would love to hear it. That would be...
Yes, it's called el método cardiofónico. Cardiofónico. And it comes from an old vinyl, you know, from a doctor that recorded different heartbeat pathologies.
Wow.
Do you see, Ryan? Everybody features Germán. We need to bring him here.
Yes,
literally everybody. It's so good.
All right. Well, he's one of the best inspiration we all can.
Yeah. Well, then your homework, Sergio, is after we get done here, you have to message him and say, "Hey, when in the next 3 or 4 weeks can you talk to us? Can you do it?"
He's my teacher, so I can talk to him on the next lesson. I already talked to him, and he said yes. So probably we will have him on the second season.
Great. Well, going back to our previous discussion, you were talking about these different centuries of instruments, and I'm curious, since you have a lot of instruments and some of them of quite high up in age, how do the instruments that you're talking about, say the 18th century instruments, which are well built and sound fantastic, how do they compare to today's instruments?
Okay, well,
is that even a comparison you can make, really? I guess that's another question.
Well, I think it's hard to compare those old instruments with the new build ones. I guess what you can compare is the build quality, so the craftsmanship. And I have to admit, in the last 15 years, 10, 15, almost 20, the building level has increased really a lot. For that, we have to thank some of the builders that we know very well, like Wolfgang Weißer-Bommer,
yes,
who has allowed us to reach new level for the Hurdy Gurdy. And so, if you compare those instruments, it's a completely different work, actually. You can compare 19th century and 12th century with 18th century, but the 21st century instruments are something completely different from what was before.
Right.
Is it the level? The quality is there. I would say the quality is the same.
Well, I'm curious about the wood, though. You know, you're talking about how the wood was different, and you know, I recently moved into an old house, and the lumber in that old house is solid and straight, and I mean, it is amazing the quality of wood that I see here. And this is from a house that was probably built 100 years ago, and I see houses now that don't seem to have that. So I'm curious, do you notice? Are builders today able to access the kind of wood that they had in the 18th century? Does it exist?
That's a good question. Well, actually, we still have some good wood left. Well, not the wood that used to be used for those kind of instruments. So, like, for example, the top of 18th century instrument, it's a kind of wood that doesn't exist anymore. It's not extinct. It doesn't exist.
Which is it? Which kind of wood is it?
From Cuba.
Cuban mahogany, of course. Yes, I know that. Yes.
It doesn't exist anymore. It has used all of it because it had nice sound properties, and actually it was also very good looking. So within 18th and 19th century, all of it has been used in order to make either instruments or a lot of furniture. A lot of 18 and 19 furniture are made out of mahogany from Cuba. Every now and then you can find, maybe you can tear apart
a fantastic table to make
a regular table from the Hurdy Gurdy. I know a few friends of mine, they did that. the result, it's awesome, because then the instrument really sounds very good, actually.
That's
Two instruments build up with like tear apart furniture in order to make an instrument.
Right.
Imagine how expensive was back then to ship wood from Cuba, from
and
Cuba.
Actually, you have to think that such instruments were really highly cost. Also, for the aristocracy, they were buying it.
Of course. That's why you see that fine inlay work on some of the bed, and yes.
And to buy one of those instruments could cost as much as building a proper bathroom. So with all the so if you think today how much it could cost to have a high-tech bathroom, so like the best of the best, and you have to point out quite some hundreds of euros nowadays. Back then, it was the same amount of money. So it was about between like 5, 6, and 12, 16 golden Louis Louis 15. The amount of money was this kind of comparison.
Right. So all these instruments that you have, because I can see 3 at the moment. Okay, you have more somewhere on that wall, right?
Yeah.
So my next question is, since I've gotten involved in the Hurdy Gurdy, I also seem to be accumulating Hurdy Gurdies, and I'm curious, how many Hurdy Gurdies is too many Hurdy Gurdies?
I don't think there's a maximum, actually.
Never.
It's never gonna be too many.
You never feel bad that you can't play them all, or do you play them all?
Well, I try to play them all. Every now and then I sell some of them so that they get played. Because if there are some of them that I don't play enough, I prefer to sell one of those to somebody that is willing to play. So I do that.
But what about maintenance for them? I mean, that's the thing that, as I look at these Hurdy Gurdies and I think to myself, I have to keep maintaining these, and obviously you do. Is it just something that you do on a cycle, on a schedule, or just as it is needed? How do you keep all the Hurdy Gurdies that you have in good shape? That's my question.
Well, when you need to do some work on them, it's when you play them. And you detect any little things that has to be done, you detect it while playing. So every time I play an instrument, I settle it properly. And probably I just sorted out everything so that in the end, when I finished playing the instrument, it's in good condition.
And do you find that when you haven't played one, I'm just curious about all this. When you haven't played one for a while, does it seem to stay in the same kind of setup and shape that it was previously, or do you have to do a little more work on it if you haven't played them for a while?
It depends. Actually, it depends from the instruments. Some of them actually don't even detune. So I just take it and play.
Wow.
I don't need even to tune it. That's quite the case of the 18th century instruments. I normally just take them out and play them, and they are always in tune.
Yeah, the build quality seems to be very good. So I am also curious, what are the markers that tell you that Hurdy Gurdy is from the 18th century? I mean, imagine I go to a museum and I see 2 instruments. Are there any markers that will tell me that specific instrument is from the 18th century and not from the 19th?
Okay, well, that's a complicated question.
Okay.
Because of course there are, but there are so many, and it's difficult just to answer to this question with one answer. It would take, I think, several hours. Because it depends from each maker. So each maker had his own way to build and his own little details that differs from others. Sometimes you cannot guess which is the builder just by, even if you look at everything, sometimes you can just say it's anonymous, but you can say like it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, because
it doesn't have the details of that specific builder.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
So like what's the main difference between 18th and 19th century instrument, and that's a thing you can easily detect. It's the C hole.
Sorry, what? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The sound hole, right? Not the sound hole. The like the F hole in a violin. Like, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, of course, yes.
So those C changes from period, from place where it's built, the instrument. Each places and each time has a different shape for it. And already by looking at it, you can say, well, this instrument might be 18th century, might be a copy of an 18th century instrument, might come from Genza or Mircourt for the 19th century instrument. Because there are specific ways to carve those on the resonance table. So this is one of the way, one of the first main thing you can detect on an instrument.
So when another quick question, and this is more for the beginner and me and the beginners that are listening. When it comes to the maintenance, and since you've got so many Hurdy Gurdies, how often or how regularly should one change the strings on their instrument? Is there like a set time, or is it just depend on how much you play?
There are many different feelings about this. Of course, it depends also on the amount of hours you are spending on top of an instrument. And it depends if it's gut string, or metal wounded string.
Okay.
If it's metal wounded string, they tend to break more easily, and they last, even if they don't break, they will last less. So it's mainly up to 1 year, and then you have to change them.
Okay.
Gut strings, I would keep them up to 2 years. But actually, when it's 2 years old, even the gut string is not working, it's not vibrating the same way. And you can start to have some problems in the intonation. So sometimes you have problems in the intonation, and maybe just a few tangents that doesn't work properly, and you take them up and then down and then up and then down, and you change the chord, and you change the rosin, add rosin, remove rosin, change chord again. It seems nothing will make it sound as it should, and then you change the string and everything works.
Everything works. Yes, the instrument is trolling you. Yes,
that is so helpful, because the reason I asked is because I'm about the year mark of the good instrument that I finally got, and I've been playing it, and I keep hitting the B or hitting an E, and I'm like, why is this not intonating right? And I go in and I mess with the tangent a little bit, and it stays that way for a little bit, and so changing this, it's time to change the strings. That's what you're telling me.
Probably, yes.
Okay.
Also, sometimes, when, especially for the drones, you get some good signal. That is, when it starts to do some squeaking sound, and the coffin is perfect and freshly new. The rosin is perfect, but still, every now and then, the drones goes to some squeaky sound. This is the signal the drones need to be changed as well.
Okay.
We are all a bit more lazy in changing drones.
Oh yes, I am very, very lazy, and also because they are crazy expensive strings. So I always say I hate guitar players for this, because they can change the strings every month.
Well, that was super helpful. Thank you. Yeah, now I'm going to have to change some strings here, but that's all right. I can do it. You were going to, well, go ahead, Sergio. You had a question?
Yes, we've been talking a lot of the Gurdies from the 18th century, but we didn't talk a lot about the 19th century period. Can you tell us a little bit about Mircourt and Gensat and everything?
So, 19th century, I think there we can start from the most known Hurdy Gurdy place, that is Genza. So Genza it's a village in the center of France, so in Auvergne, and there, starting from the first half of 19th century, a builder, Pajot, so the first one of the Pajot dynasty, he started to build Hurdy Gurdies. It was the very early beginning of the 19th century, and he wasn't a builder himself, and he taught to himself to build them, and he first did some copy of 18th century, some instruments, and then he developed his own way to build instruments, and his son went to study how it's called to study literary, to study the making of instruments.
Yes.
To become a builder, and so they started little by little to have to construct instruments, to sell instruments, and actually the whole village within this century became a sort of factory of Hurdy Gurdies. And they produced really tones and tones of instruments. And all the names from Genza were related to Pajot. So either they were Pajot, or they have worked for Pajot, or trained themselves at their ateliers, and then started to build by themselves. And one funny thing is that sometimes you take an instrument from that period, from Genza, and you see a name stamped on it. But it's not from that builder. When one of them had too much work, he gave some work to another one.
And then he just put the
his own stamp on it. So you have some Pajot build up from Migo, for example.
Okay. Interesting.
It's quite funny, and it was quite common to see such thing happening.
And
they were used to build so many Hurdy Gurdies, and they were the main builders of that period actually, and they were selling everywhere in France and even beyond France. We could find even some instruments from Genza here in Italy. We have found some, like in old houses. We have found a few Genza instruments, and there were some sellers that went to France to take instruments and to sell them in Italy. We have some record of that. It's quite interesting.
He used to make other instruments as well, not only Hurdy Gurdies, right? Some wind instruments, or am I right?
At the very end of the dynasty, actually.
It was late. Okay.
Late, because Pajot always, and all the other, like Tampa, Migo, Kai Decant,
Yes.
They used to build only Hurdy Gurdies. In the end, so we are late 19th century and mostly beginning of 12th century. The last Pajot, so Pajot Jeune, he started to have a sort of musical instrument industry. So he wasn't really building several kinds of instruments. Actually, he built like less Hurdy Gurdies, still some. And then he had many people building any sort of instrument for him, and then he just placed the stamp on top. Like here, I have a trumpet from Pajot Jeune.
Oh, really? Bless you, Ryan.
Sorry.
A trumpet.
And you can see from clarinet to violins to accordions, really everything with the brand Pajot Jeune on top.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's quite funny. And I have the anecdotes about all the destroyed Hurdy Gurdies. I think you want to know about them.
Yes, yes.
Destroyed Hurdy Gurdies. I don't know if I want to know about this.
Well,
Tell us.
we were saying not all the instruments really can be alive after those centuries. And there are some sad stories about some 19th century instruments. I'm going to tell you two of those sad stories. Like one instrument has been torn apart by a kid who used to play with the hurdy-gurdy. Like he attached a string to the head and used to walk outside and taking the instruments like this behind him.
No, he was walking the hurdy-gurdy like a dog.
Yes.
No.
I think someone would say this is the best using for a hurdy-gurdy.
Sure, yes. Let's do it. Come on.
Even more useful usage of it was to close a hole in the chimney.
Oh, what?
Yes. So the chimney had a hole in it, and they used a lute back hurdy-gurdy to close the hole.
But wait a second. What you tell us about the kid walking the hurdy-gurdy like a dog? Isn't it the same thing as guitar makers do for relicking the fenders?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, maybe it was an early relicking process.
Natural aging. Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
So, what when it comes to modern instruments, do you have modern instruments?
And a very nice one.
Okay.
I have an instrument from Wolfgang.
Okay.
I have an Allegro. It's a wonderful instrument. I really love it. Of course, all of these instruments are amazing. And I had the chance to find this one, like second-handed, and it was an instrument I used to see many years ago, played by some friend of mine, and I always wanted to have that particular instrument because it was one of the best I ever seen. And normally if you have a resonance string, they resonate and they give a lot of resonance on top. This instrument has the same resonance without the resonance string.
Nice.
It's like magic. I don't know how it works, but it does. So,
is it the drones that are just resonating when they're not on, or?
Yeah, but so the drones where they are on, they resonate.
Yeah.
But even when they are working, still you have the same amount of resonance. So it's not only the drones. I guess something.
Maybe something with the top, or it's always fantastic when you see one of those instruments that really resonates. The whole thing resonates and vibrates. It's fantastic.
It thinks alive. It really thinks alive. You just poke it and it tells you something.
Is this the instrument that you use mainly with your band, or do you use all of your instruments with your band?
So when I play folk music, I mainly use the modern Hurdy Gurdy. And so this one, the one from Wolfgang. Instead, I have a baroque project, and there I use the baroque instruments. Then of course it depends. Sometimes I need to take a specific instrument, either 19th or like medieval shaped one, depending on the situation, on the occasion. I do some medieval music as well. So there I mostly use, I have a medieval shaped Hurdy Gurdy that I use specifically for that. And every now and then I do some conference. Whenever a conference, there I take many instruments with
Nice.
Right.
You have the possibility to hear different instruments with different tuning and different sounds. It's always interesting.
When you learn to play the Hurdy Gurdy, how did you get started? Did you did you already know you wanted to play, and so you had a teacher and a repertoire you wanted to study, or how did you get involved and how did you start playing the hurdy-gurdy?
That's quite funny, and I would call myself very lucky actually, because
you learned from Germán Díaz, right?
No, actually not. When I started hurdy-gurdy, internet wasn't so wide. So it was 2001. I was just a child when I started. And it was at school. So I've never seen or heard about the hurdy-gurdy before. And when I went to the middle school, there my music teacher told us, okay, here we are gonna have a musical project in which you can play the hurdy-gurdy or the accordion. So
Wow!
Yes. So he organized with the school. He bought one hurdy-gurdy, one study model, and 2 accordions, and he organized with some teacher lesson for the school. And so there I could have the chance to see for my very first time, the hurdy-gurdy, and I could choose between the hurdy-gurdy or the diatonic accordion. And when I was a child, I used to hate the accordion. So to see the diatonic accordion was to me something not really nice. But actually, as soon as I saw the hurdy-gurdy, it was like immediately falling in love with it. It was like love at first sight. And there I started. So I had within those 2-3 years of school, I could start my path into the garden world. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, I went through many workshops, through many lessons from French players, maybe. And then little by little, I developed and I trained myself and studied.
So you've been playing about 20 years now, then?
It's 20 years, yes.
Okay. Do you teach hurdy-gurdy as well, or is it just the work you do with your band?
Yes, I'm teaching as well. And actually, since the pandemic, that's the only thing I'm doing.
Okay.
Yes, I feel the same. I want to go back to play. World, please fix yourself.
Yeah.
I really miss playing actually, because it's not, of course, yes, you earn money by playing, but it's not that. It's not only that. I really miss the feeling of being on a stage, playing with other people, and doing a concert, a performance. That's something that's really part of you when you play, when you're a musician. Mm-hmm. And being denied, it seems like a part of you is denied. And it's really hard not to be able to do concerts. Actually.
Well, it's a good time to focus on home recordings, though, right? I mean, how's your composition going?
Well, I do compose every now and then a few songs. I wouldn't call myself a composer. Actually. Okay. Mm-hmm. More a player than a composer. And well, lately I throw myself almost totally into baroque music. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of music I really love. I really love this genre, and it's like my everyday playing.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I actually, as we were talking, Tobie did message me and said that she is up for doing a podcast with us, and all we have to do is schedule it.
Yes, Tobie, come on.
So we'll do it. We'll do it. So we're about to the end of our time, and I think I might have one more question, but Sergio, I'm curious, do you have any more questions?
I have tons of questions, but we may be here 5 hours if we start talking about how to interpret baroque music and the certain techniques we use and what to not use to sound more baroque. I'm very interested on that, but I don't know if you, Francesco, can tell us a little bit about the correct way to perform baroque music. I would be very interested.
Okay, well, of course, the best one to answer this question is Tobie herself.
Yeah, we will ask her as well.
We'll ask her too.
I'm one of her students, actually. So.
Yes.
Everything I know from her. Well, what I can tell is that there are methods, actual methods written in the 18th century. And it exists like 4 or 5 of them. So it exists one from Dupuy, one from Corrette, one from Boin, and there's another one anonymous. The most interesting ones are the one from Dupuy and the one from Boin. I can give the link to those. It's everything free to download on internet.
Why we don't have that, Ryan? We need those methods.
So
actually, in those 2 methods, also something about the trumpet part is written down. So a lot of things is written down about how to play the ornamentation, how to play with the left hand, but very, very few is written down on the trumpet part. For nowadays, in modern time, it's like essential. We work with the trumpet as it was a drum. So it's a percussion. So we create patterns, we create rhythms that we then place on top of a melody. Then it wasn't like this. So the use of the trumpet is completely different. And you use it just to announce some notes, and the count of accent you are placing there go alongside the ornaments you use to place accents on the melody itself. So you are placing accent on the melody with your left hand, and the way you handle the wheel. So you handle the wheel not just turning, playing, but you need to give a lot of expression to it. So you actually change a lot the speed of the wheel.
So it's not simply just using it like a drum or a rhythm. It's using it to to put more emphasis towards accents or ornamentations. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
You emphasize parts of it when you have like crescendo or diminuendo. You use them to create this kind of effect as well as changing the speed while turning and while beating as well. So there's a lot of dynamic into the way you handle the crank and you handle the wheel. So never just one speed, but multiple speed.
It's so interesting. Love it.
And you really need to have a very quick left hand, because some passages are quite tricky.
Okay.
I can swear it can be quite tricky, and it can be quite tricky quite fast.
Interesting.
There are some easy sonatas, but the very interesting ones are complicated. If you want to play some easy, it's written down, not too nice, but easy, affordable. And then there's those really cool sonatas where you say, "Oh yeah, I love this one," and listen to this passage, and are the most complicated.
Right. Well, this isn't the question I had in mind, so you might get 2 here, but this one should be fairly easy for someone who wants to learn one of these sonatas that you're talking about. And let's say they're not super amazing hurdy-gurdy players, but they're okay. What would be 1 or 2 of the sonatas that you would recommend someone to try to learn just to get started into that style?
Right. So I think I would go through something from Boismortier. There are sonatas from Boismortier, very nice and not too complicated to play.
Okay.
I would maybe skip Dupuy.
Okay.
Also something from Chedeville. Actually, it exists 2 Chedeville. It's not just one.
Oh.
We're 2 brothers. So Nicolas Chedeville and Esprit Philippe Chedeville. Esprit Philippe, he wrote some nice melodies, not too complicated to play. And I'm always so bad with remembering the titles. But it's
How about you just send me the sheet music?
yeah.
Yes.
I would send it, and actually all those sonatas, almost all the repertoire, it's all free to discharge from internet.
Oh, okay.
Is it on EMSLP, that
Yes,
website,
either
right?
there or on Gallica. So Gallica.fr, this French huge, immense database where there's an insane amount of stuff, old stuff, and there you can find really a lot of Hurdy Gurdy music from 18th century.
Excellent.
And the only problem about reading those melodies is that it's written
The
in
glyphs.
key. It's the key. Because there's a specific key for Hurdy Gurdy in the Baroque era that is the French violin key. That is where you have the G on the first line of your pentagram.
Yes, G clef on the first line. So you have to transpose everything.
Yeah, but actually it's like reading the bass line.
Okay, then not too bad.
Like one octave up.
Not too bad for piano players or cello players.
If you play piano, you know the bass line, how to read it. It's the same, exactly the same.
Cool.
Well, I'm neither a cello nor a piano player, so I guess I'm out of luck.
Well, there are some melodies transposed into the modern key, into the normal violin key.
Right.
But almost all of them are in the original state. So
Right.
you have the original scores downloaded. So you need to learn it, but it's not too complicated. Actually, once you get used to it, it's quite easy.
Okay. And the final question, which I'm surprised Sergio didn't ask, so I'm going to ask it. Who are your top 3 or top 5 players that inspire you?
Well,
The first ones that come to mind, just.
Of course, one of the first, especially now, is Tobie. So Tobie Miller is one of my greatest idols,
Mm-hmm.
which especially for Baroque music. If I need to point to something to understand what I should do, I point to her. So it's the standard.
Okay.
Then, of course, Valentin Clastrier.
Of course.
From which I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of things from him, and his ideas. I love the ideas. Crazy, amazing ideas. And Grégory Jolivet, who made my technique completely develop and become what it's my technique nowadays. So I can really make a line like before taking lesson with him and after taking lesson with him. It really made for me a big change back then. It made me realize a lot of things, and especially when you think like you talk to yourself, it is not really always that the good thing to do. Because before going to him, I did many things by myself, and then I went there and I realized that especially my right hand wasn't as good as I thought. So it was like all scrambled. So after seeing him play and the teaching he gave me, I realized, okay, maybe I start round again for the right hand and see what happens. And that makes a huge difference.
Excellent.
Those 3 are some of the greatest inspiration for me. Then I can name many actually.
Well, how about 2 more? Just 2 more.
2 more. Well, Nigel Eaton.
Go.
I think for everybody, it's a myth for everybody. I grew up with the myth of Nigel Eaton. As everybody else, I'd say. And of course, Herman. His music is magical. It's magic.
A lot of people mention these names, eh? It's almost always the same, eh? How it's a very big impact that these guys did to the Hurdy Gurdy world. I love it.
Well, the great thing too is number one, I'm pretty sure they're all still alive. They're accessible. You know, these are people that you can actually learn from and interact with. I mean, that's kind of the beautiful thing about the whole thing. Well, we'll go ahead and finish up today. And there was one more track that you recommended, and this is a Tobie Miller track, and this is Allegro and Rondeau. And this is from, which album is this from? Let me see here. Which one? What is it?
La Belle Viellieux.
Okay, yeah, and this is one I've seen quite often popping up on YouTube. So we'll definitely put a link to that too. Is there anything you'd like to say about this track before we close out today?
Well, the whole album is amazing, and I listen to it like every day. And especially this track comes from a very nice sonata, and the sonata is played. All of the sonata is played in the CD, and it's the last sonata of the Danguy method, and all the sonatas inside of that method are insanely difficult.
Okay.
It sounds marvelously, and this movement is one of my favorite overall.
All right, well, let's have a listen, and thank you so much for being here today. It was really a pleasure.
It was very nice, yes.
And thank you, Sergio. Good to see you again. So we'll see you next time on the Hurdy Gurdy Cafe.